Hello everyone, welcome back to Inktober Fest with Maker Forte. Kimberly here from KimmyB16 and I'm so excited to share with you some tips on how to use Distress Micro Glaze. Micro Glaze is a really nice product to use when you're working with any ink that has water reactive properties. Distress inks and oxides are the water reactive inks that most people are familiar with. But Maker Forte has color Hive inks that are also water reactive. I'll be working with all of these today. Micro Glaze can be used for a resist technique as well as a sealer. One of the popular uses for water reactive inks is the ability to spritz the ink with water and lift off some of the ink. Sealing the ink with the glaze prevents the ink from lifting off the paper. So first I would like to show you how the Micro Glaze will seal this sentiment stamped with red luster color Hive ink on watercolor cardstock. It is important that your ink is completely dry before applying the glaze. The left statement will be sealed with the glaze and the right will have none. I'm going to use my finger to apply a thin layer of the glaze, and even though I have sped up the video, I am rubbing the glaze into the cardstock really well. Keep in mind, Micro Glaze will only seal porous surfaces, so this will not work on glass. Once I have applied the glaze, I am going to buff off any excess with a paper towel. Even though I use a very small amount of glaze, there is a little excess that I do not want to accidentally smear, as it will resist the ink wherever it goes. Watch what happens when I spray the sealed sentiment with water. Because the Micro Glaze is water resistant, the water just beads up on the surface. Now watch what happens when I spray the unsealed sentiment. It is a cool effect, but you may not want that on your project, so the glaze will help prevent it. Next, I would like to show you how the Micro Glaze will resist ink when ink blending. I'm using Maker Forte Color Hive ink, English Mustard, red luster, and telephone box to blend all over this piece of ultra white cardstock. I did have to speed up the ink blending so the video wouldn't be too long. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could all craft this fast for real? I did get a spot of telephone box on my panel from accidentally sticking my finger in the pad, but I live by the motto, there are no mistakes, only embellishment opportunities. I just wanted to finish up a little more mustard and red luster to get a nice blend. Now I'm going to put the Vintage Vine stencil on my panel. This time when I apply the Micro Glaze, I'm going to use the foam applicator. This works great for covering a large area. It is important to have a foam applicator specifically for your Micro Glaze because it will ruin your pads if you rub that applicator into your ink pad. You can just pop the foam off the handle and store it inside the Micro Glaze jar for safekeeping. Now for this panel, I'm not going to buff off the excess glaze because I don't want to smear the lines and the image will not show through the next ink color. Again, I used a very thin layer of glaze on the applicator, however it does pull up along the edges of the stencil, so I'm going to try to blot off some of the excess so it will not ruin my ink blender. Now I'm going to blend Color Hive Coronation Purple around the edges of the panel. You can start to see the stencil showing through as the glaze resists the ink. I spritzed the panel with water because I do like the look of the droplets. How cool is that? I love the way these colors look together and how the glaze resisted the ink. Now I'm going to show you what glossy cardstock and Distress Oxides look like with Micro Glaze. I'm using the Tetra Dot stencil for Maker Forte and I'm going to apply the Micro Glaze with my finger. I would not have the control to keep the glaze in the random areas of the stencil I want to apply to if I use the foam applicator. Again, I'm just picking up a thin layer of the glaze on my finger and rubbing it into random dots on the stencil. I am applying the Micro Glaze here before I add any ink because I would like the areas to resist the ink and let the white come through. I'm adding Squeezed Lemonade Distress Oxide to my mat and spritzing it and the tag with water. I'm going to smush ink onto the cardstock, but because I am not using a blender brush here, I will not blot or buff the Micro Glaze from the tag before smushing it. You can already see some of the white dots showing through. Next, I'm going to quickly heat the ink to dry it. You do want to be careful not to overheat the glaze because it will not resist as good if it's all melted. See all the dots? Now I'm going to wipe off my mat really well because I do not want any of the microglaze that may have gotten on the mat to get onto my next ink pad that I'm going to smush on it. Next, I'm going to repeat the process using the Tetra Dot stencil to apply the microglaze through some of the dots to cover the yellow ink. The next ink I will smush on my mat is crushed olive oxide. You can see some of the yellow dots showing through where I put the microglaze as it's resisting the crushed olive ink. I'm going to dab off the beaded up ink with a paper towel, and you can start to see where I may have heated the microglaze a little too much because the ink's not resisting. While I'm drying the ink, I want to mention that it's really important to clean the glaze off your stencils with warm water and soap so you do not contaminate your blender brushes with the glaze. The last ink I'm going to use for this example is Wild Honey Oxide. I really love these colors together. One of the qualities that oxide inks differ from regular distress ink is the chalky finish. I just want to show you what this will look like if you buff the leftover microglaze over the tag. You may want the chalky look, but if you prefer a shiny look, the microglaze will buff away the chalky look and the colors really pop and look so beautiful. I think this looks so cool and would make an awesome fall tag. I really love the look glossy cardstock gives to this technique. Now we are going to make our tag. I pre-stamped this beautiful background stamp using Fog Color Hive ink and let it dry. I'm going to use the Unbelievable stencil, and again I'm going to use my finger to rub the microglaze through the stencil in various spots. I wanted to have the design of the background stamp show through the areas the ink resists. I will be using Twisted Citron and Crushed Olive Oxides for smushing this time. You can start to see the ink resisting where the microglaze was rubbed over the leaf stencil. I do like to dry my tags from the front and the back so that they dry a little flatter instead of curling. I'm going to finish off the ink smushing with Wild Honey Oxide. I really love these colors together. I think they look so pretty for the fall. While I dry this, you can see me dabbing some of the ink that beaded on the glaze off with a paper towel. I would like to add a little ink splatter to the tag, so I'm going to smush Gathered Twigs Oxide on an acrylic block, spritz it with water, and using a paintbrush, I will flick it onto the tag. To finish this tag, I'm going to dry it and dab off the ink splatters that beaded up over the microglaze. I can see in some spots I heated the microglaze a little too much and some of the ink splatter did seep through, which is fine for my tag because that was the look I was going for. Just keep in mind, microglaze is not meant to be heat set, so try to be careful not to overheat it when drying your ink. I just wanted to revisit what we made today and show how I finished off a couple of the projects. I just love how the stenciled image looks here from the resist. Oh, and this is where the red smudge was for my finger. How fun is this fall tag? I really love the area of the leaf where the ink resisted and the fog ink background shows through. And the glossy cardstock really brightens the ink colors after applying the microglaze over the oxides. Thank you so much for watching today. If you like this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up. And you can visit me at KimmyB16 on YouTube and Instagram. Have a great day.